Welcome back to Graveyard Graham's Midnight Ride, and I'm going to hit you with a bit of a philosophical question early in the morning. I was thinking about this earlier today. There's a story that I've talked about a few times recently, the Christopher Priest novel, The Prestige, and to a larger extent, Christopher Nolan's adapted movie from 2006. I was thinking about the conclusion of that story and what it really means, and how when I walked out of the theater after seeing it, it was like, wow, that blew my mind. That was amazing. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized like this wasn't a positive story. It wasn't a happy story. It was actually brutally tragic. And in the years in between, or the years since then, I've read a few other stories that I thought were incredible and powerful and moving, but they also weren't positive. Now, generally, as a rule, I'd say 85, 90, 95% of the time, I look for those uplifting qualities in stories. Where's the heroism? Where are the qualities that are worthy of emulation? Where are the characters whose actions I hope that I would have the bravery to emulate? I want to be like good characters, and I largely read good and uplifting books to kind of refill my well on that personally. That being the case, what is it about these, let's just say, villain stories that I find so powerful? And I did a little bit of compare and contrast in my mind. If you remember on my old podcast, I once did a very long Hunger Games mega episode with my wife. We talked for 2 hours, mainly about that fourth book that had come out in 2020, the prequel that covered the origin story of President Snow when he was 18 years old. I gave that book 5 stars, but it wasn't, obviously it was the backstory of the villain, and it wasn't one that you'd read and you say, yeah, I want to be like this guy. In fact, hopefully, if you're stable and healthy, you read a book like that and you say, okay, I want to go in the opposite direction. And while I was talking about that with my wife, I compared it to other villain stories that I've read over the years, and I think I figured out what the key ingredient is. These are stories that don't make excuses or justifications for the evil behavior of the villains who are at the center of the story. I think in the purest sense, these stories are cautionary tales. They are warnings. They show how somebody can get to be this way, and if you're taking the right lessons from it, the right read on it, then the net result is, holy crap, I should avoid these decisions so that I avoid this conclusion. 2 of the books that I talked about, well, one book, one movie, in that were, I can't remember the name of the lady who wrote this. The series is called the Lunar Chronicles. Cinder is the first book, and then Scarlet, and basically these are old, like, Germanic fairy tales that were adapted to a sci-fi setting and set in the future when mankind has colonized Mars. We've got spaceships and stuff, and these characters are like, Cinderella is a cyborg. Scarlet is protected by a bioengineered werewolf. There's a Rapunzel character who's trapped in a satellite. There is a Snow White character who's the daughter of the evil queen of the moon. All of the very plain parallels are there. So these are very clearly based on these old fairy tales that we all know and love, but the setting is refreshing and the way that they all tie together is very refreshing. Well, the author wrote a prequel novel, and I want to say it might have been between the 3rd and 4th main book. It was an origin story for the villain, Queen Lavanna, I want to say was her name. And it casted her as a tragic figure. She was ugly or misshapen or something. She had to use her glamour, her magic to hide her looks. And she fell for a guy who I believe he was married, and she had no chance in hell of actually getting a an organic shot with him, we'll say. So instead, she used magic. I can't remember if it was a potion like what's her face in that sixth Harry Potter book, or if it was something else, but she basically forced this guy to be with her. Okay, rhymes with nape. And the hell of it was, he was at least lucid enough to realize what was happening and that he couldn't escape it, and he could even voice his protests. But like, once she had him, she couldn't bring herself to let him go because she would go back to being alone. And the whole thing spun off into just a brutal tragedy at the end that made her embrace cruelty and use it as a tool, and that was supposed to explain how she became the way that she was. More on that in a second. I also compared it to the 2019 Joker movie with Joaquin Phoenix, which I kind of don't want the Joker to have an origin story that's overly defined, in the same sense that I don't want an origin story for Han Solo, because these characters are more powerful as forces of nature or as manifestations of a certain life. Han's roguish charm comes partly from the fact that he's so mysterious that the details of his history aren't pinned down. If you want to know about him, you just got to observe him. You don't necessarily need to know why he's so rakish and willing to take risks and going for the big prize. You don't need to know how he got there. It's more alluring that he is there. Joker is better off as just a terrifying force that Batman has to fight against. You don't need to justify or explain his evil. He's just a representation of that evil. And especially with the story that they gave him in that movie, where he had some kind of severe mental illness and he was mistreated and abused by people, and finally just decided that his one shot at stability or calm or any kind of element of his life that he wanted was to just start dishing out cruelty and pain to people, then there's some kind of moral question in there that tries to present his actions as justified. And like I said in the podcast, if his actions are justified, then what does that say about Batman who's trying to stop him? The point in all of this is that there's a wrong way to present the complexity of villains, especially if you're then trying to say that, oh, well, from their perspective, they are justified. Yeah, naturally, they would probably think that they were justified, but what if justification doesn't come into it? What if they just do it because they want to? Isn't that worse? And wouldn't that be a more compelling and a more well-developed villain? This brings me to the point of Coriolanus Snow, the main villain in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. He had some childhood resentment of the fact that he was born to wealth and privilege, lost it during the war, and the remainder of his family's wealth and resources were dwindling until finally he had a shot at getting it all back as a mentor in the games. He cheated to get it. His cheating was exposed, and then he was exiled to the districts. And through a confluence of complicated events, he found himself at the end of the story with a choice. I can completely abscond from the nation and from this structure that I'm familiar with to embrace things that I might want, like love and camaraderie and this girl that I've fallen for. Or I can take this other path, which will drive me straight to the heart of the nation and to the pinnacle of government and to the height of power. Which one do I want? And he had the choice between love and power, and he chose power because that was his highest value, his highest virtue. And he didn't care who he hurt. There were very few people in the world that he cared about. He cared about his cousin and his grandmother. But most of all, there was nobody that he loved more than himself. And he wanted power to satisfy that love. Now, going back to the Prestige, which I mentioned at the beginning, it was a tale of what originally started out as a rivalry between two magicians, and I can't remember both of their names. I just think of Jackman and Bale. That's pretty much it. Who were very dedicated to their craft, but that dedication surpassed other things that it shouldn't have. Jackman had a tragedy when a magic trick with his wife went wrong and she died, and he blamed Bale for it, and that spawned their rivalry, which then escalated and escalated and escalated, and finally resulted in Bale's twin brother dying and Jackman cloning himself and killing himself 100 times to one up this other dude. He became so manic and so obsessed with pulling this off that he was willing to kill himself 100 times to do it. Obviously, that's not a commendable action. That's not an uplifting thing. That's not positive. That's not praiseworthy. It's not any of that stuff. So why do I find this story so compelling and so powerful and so moving? Well, it's one story amongst many that I admire and that I love and that I would rewatch. But I wouldn't rewatch this kind of story as the bulk of my entertainment. I wouldn't want to consume this kind of value in my entertainment, because ultimately what you consume spiritually, morally, intellectually, you start to mimic that, whether directly or indirectly without knowing it. At the end of the day, you become what you feed yourself. Now, so-called Sigma characters and anti-heroes and stories like this have become way more popular in my lifetime. Breaking Bad, Peaky Blinders, shows like this that they've got that tone and those values at their core. I don't think that's a good thing. I would rather continue to find stories that are praiseworthy and uplifting and virtuous. But I think as an occasional insert, stories like this, like The Prestige, like The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, stories that are about the villain and don't excuse his actions, have value as well, because they remind us of our own folly, or at least they should. They warn us of hubris and of pride and of the love of power over the love of more noble things. Jackman would have been better off retreating into the shadows as a mourning widower than to murder himself 100 times and lose in the end anyway, than becoming so obsessed with one-upping his magical rival. Was that really a worthy pursuit? Or would he have been better off just embracing a nobler virtue? The same thing with President Snow. How much better would the entire nation have been if he had chosen love of others over a love of power? These are the kind of stories that ought to make you reflect on what your own hubris and shortcomings and misplaced values could be. But I think if you read too many of them, and especially if you read and consume too many of them that are focused in the wrong areas, you might start to make excuses for your lower impulses and your lower virtues. Those are my thoughts on that subject. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Till next time, drive safe. See you out there.